I wasn't expecting peace to look like beige walls, laminated floors, and a faint scent of eucalyptus. But as I stepped into the small physical therapy clinic, something in me exhaled. It was quiet, calm, the kind of place that didn't ask anything of you. I almost turned around when I saw the empty reception desk, unsure if I was supposed to be here yet. I hadn't committed to an appointment. I just wanted to look around. After everything that had happened, I was learning not to rush into things. A man stepped out from a side hallway, flipping through a chart. Tall, lean, early 30s at most. Dark hair, rolled up sleeves, and a quiet presence that made you feel you didn't need to say much. He noticed me, stopped, and offered a warm smile. "Are you here for an evaluation?" "Not exactly." I gestured toward the reception desk. "I wanted to see the space first. I'm supposed to start therapy soon." Holding up my arm as if he couldn't see the cast, I said, "Wrist fracture." He nodded, stepping closer with an easy, unhurried pace. "We don't usually give tours, but I can show you around. I'm Jacob." "Lila." I glanced at the bandaged cast on my wrist, the last remnant of the worst winter of my life. "Nice to meet you." Jacob showed me the exercise area, the clean equipment, and the private cubicles in back. He spoke softly, clearly, never filling the silence just to fill it. I found myself matching his quiet rhythm. When he handed me a clipboard to book an appointment, I hesitated for only a second before filling it out. My name looked unfamiliar in my handwriting, like someone I used to be. It had started with a stairwell and a slick patch of ice. One moment I was carrying coffee and a stack of proofs to the office. The next I was sprawled on the concrete, my wrist bent at an angle it was never meant to be. Grant had been annoyed when I called. "Lila, I'm walking into a meeting," he'd said. "Can't you call a cab?" He picked me up eventually, after rescheduling his pitch. At urgent care, he joked with the nurse that I was dramatic about pain. The nurse didn't laugh. I was in a cast for 8 weeks. I didn't realize until much later that bones were the easy part. Grant never hit me or raised his voice. But the damage didn't come from shouting. It came from comments like, "You should rest more," as he took over my calendar. "You're just stressed," when I tried to talk about how I felt. "We're almost there," when I asked if we could slow down the wedding plans. "We already delayed it once," he'd said, when I mentioned it again. "You're not still using your wrist as an excuse, are you?" My friends noticed before I did. Erica had been blunt. "You don't laugh anymore," she'd said over takeout one night. "You used to light up rooms. Now you're always waiting for something to go wrong." Jasmine was more cautious. "I'm not saying he's bad, just, does he make you feel like you?" Even my mother, when I told her Grant had been cold after the accident, said, "No man is perfect, Lila. If you want understanding, get a therapist." I hadn't answered, but the thought stayed. Maybe that's why I came to the clinic before committing. I needed to know what understanding actually looked like. And now that I'd seen it, in the quiet way Jacob held the door open, in the calmness that settled in my chest the longer I stayed, I realized I hadn't felt this still in a long time. I walked back to my car with the appointment card in my good hand. My wrist ached a little from holding the pen, but it was a good ache, a healing kind. I sat in the driver's seat and closed my eyes. 8 weeks of silence, tension, guilt, second-guessing, and being told I was too sensitive, too slow, too distracted. Jacob had said nothing profound, but the way he didn't fill the silence spoke louder than most people ever managed. It was just a tour, just an appointment card, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I'd made a choice all on my own. The first session was 3 days later. I wore the most neutral outfit I owned, as if the clothes might somehow balance out the nerves. My wrist throbbed faintly under the brace. Jacob greeted me in the reception area, clipboard in hand, glasses perched low on his nose. The glasses made him look more thoughtful than he already was, which didn't seem fair. "You're back," he said, sounding like he meant it. "I made a promise to this hand," I said, lifting my wrist. "Figured I should keep it." His smile was small but warm. "Then let's get started." The session began with measurements, gentle range of motion exercises, and a few basic stretches. Jacob explained everything before he did it, asked for consent before every movement, and never made me feel like I was wasting his time, even when I winced at the smallest motions. "You're doing well," he said, adjusting the angle of my arm. "Most people come in more guarded than this." "I had 8 weeks of being helpless," I muttered. "I'm over the whole fragile thing." Jacob didn't laugh, but his eyes softened. "It takes strength to heal. Strength isn't always obvious on the outside." By the end of the session, I was sweating more than I'd expected. My wrist buzzed like it had its own pulse. I sat on the table while Jacob made notes in my file. "Do you live nearby?" I asked, half to fill the silence, half because I was curious. He nodded. 10 minutes. My son's preschool is close by, so it's convenient." I blinked. "You have a son?" "Leo, he's 5. His voice shifted, softer, proud, but touched with something else. "Keeps me humble." I hesitated, then asked, "Do you, uh, mind if I ask about his mom?" Jacob looked up from the clipboard, then back down. "No, I don't mind." He tucked the pen behind his ear and rested a hand on the table. "Her name was Hannah. She died suddenly a little over 2 years ago of a brain aneurysm." My throat went tight. "I'm sorry. That must have been... She must have been young." He gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "A person's never too young to die. That's what I learned." Silence filled the space. Not awkward, just full. After a moment, he added, "Leo doesn't remember her. He was 3. Some days I think that's a blessing. Other days, it breaks my heart." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just sat with him in that quiet. Jacob stood, straightened his notes, and gave me my next appointment slip. "Same time?" I nodded. "Yeah, that sounds good." As I opened the door to leave, a small blur of motion streaked past me. "Leo!" Jacob called gently. The little boy turned around and looked at me, showing light brown curls, carrying a backpack covered in dinosaur patches, and a face full of joy. "Daddy! Miss June said we're going on a field trip." "That's great, bud," Jacob said, kneeling to his level. "Tell me all about it in the car, okay?" Leo looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Are you my daddy's boss?" I blinked. No, I'm just a patient." Leo frowned, clearly disappointed. "Oh, bosses have candy." "I'll bring some next time," I said, without thinking. His face lit up. "I like you." Jacob shook his head with a laugh as I walked out the door. "Careful, that's his highest compliment." That night, I iced my wrist and thought about everything he'd said. Not about Leo, though he was adorable, but about Hannah. About that soft ache in Jacob's voice, the kind that doesn't ask for pity. I thought about how careful he'd been, how present. He hadn't made it about himself. He'd just shared, then left space. Grant would have filled that silence with a monologue or changed the subject. He was always performing for someone, even when it was just me. Jacob didn't perform, he just was. And somehow, that made me feel more seen than any grand gesture ever had. By the 4th session, I stopped needing to remind myself to show up. My wrist was stiff, and the stretches were painful, but the routine itself had become soothing. Jacob had a way of anchoring the moment. He never made me feel like a project. He was calm and quiet, but not absent, just steady, like someone who could listen without trying to fix you. That week, I was supposed to have dinner with Erica and Jasmine. We hadn't met in person since my cast came off, and I was looking forward to it. But Grant called that morning. "Can you reschedule?" he asked, already mid-email as he spoke. "One of my clients just flew in. I booked us a table at that new place near 8th. "You booked a table? For tonight?" "Yes. It's important, Lila. I need you there." I hesitated. "Grant, I already made plans with the girls." There was a pause, followed by a tight laugh. "You see them all the time. This is a business dinner about my future, our future. The girls will wait. You can see them anytime." I canceled with the girls again. Jasmine sent a thumbs up emoji. Erica texted, "You're allowed to say no, you know." But I didn't say no. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. 2 days later, I had another therapy session. Grant had said he'd pick me up after. We were supposed to go over flower arrangements, or something equally thrilling. If I were honest with myself, the idea of looking at flower arrangements was slightly alarming. The sun was going down by the time I stepped outside. I waited, and after 20 minutes I tried calling. There was no answer, then I texted. "Are you on the way?" Grant. "Oh shoot, I thought it was tomorrow. Sorry, caught up at work. Can you just take an Uber?" I stared at the screen, feeling something more strongly than my recent numbness. Anger. It was so like Grant to get caught up in work and forget me. It made me wonder if I was already becoming the forgotten part of his life. Behind me, the clinic door opened and Jacob stepped out, car keys in hand. "Are you all right?" he asked. I looked up and gave a tight smile. "I'm invisible today." He hesitated for a second, then nodded toward the parking lot. "I'm heading out. If you want, I can give you a lift." I was tired, my wrist ached, and my heart felt like Grant had stepped on it and never even turned to survey the damage. Agreeing was the easiest decision I made all day. The car ride was quiet at first. His vehicle smelled faintly of peppermint and laundry detergent. Halfway home, he said, "You don't have to answer this, but was it your fiancé who forgot?" "Yes." Jacob paused, and I could see his eyes on me, not judging, but assessing. Then he said, gentle and honest, "A man who loves a woman doesn't forget to pick her up." He glanced sideways at me. If Hannah had broken her wrist and needed me for anything, I'd have walked across hot lava to get to her. He didn't say it like a pronouncement. It didn't even feel like an accusation. Just a truth he knew. I didn't reply, but I held on to the words like a stone in my pocket. That night, after dinner alone, I sat on the couch and scrolled through wedding photos I'd saved months ago. The photos, lace tablecloths, long tables, glowing candles, felt like someone else's dream now. The next day, I met Grant at a coffee shop halfway between our offices. It was neutral ground, not because he cared, but because I insisted. He didn't like that we weren't living together, had pushed for it for months. Said it would make everything easier, planning, finances, logistics, his priorities. But something deep inside me always resisted. Maybe I hadn't understood it before. Now I did. It would have made it easier for him to control everything. He arrived late, as usual, his phone in hand. "Lila, you didn't have to be dramatic," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You could have just taken a car." "You forgot," I hissed, "and you didn't even think to apologize until I brought it up." "It happens. You weren't too busy to book a dinner behind my back, or rearrange things without asking." He set the phone down. "Are we really doing this here?" "I didn't want to talk about it in your space," I said. "Or mine. This is neutral." He frowned. "You're making it sound like we're enemies." "I'm making it sound like I'm tired," I replied. Tired of being rearranged like an accessory. He leaned back, arms crossed. "That therapist of yours is filling your head with ideas." I stared at him, stunned. "My therapist hasn't said anything because I haven't told him. But you know what he did do? He drove me home because you didn't, not because he wanted anything, but because I was there without a ride. And he didn't ask for anything in return." "So now you're defending him?" "I'm defending myself," I said, "because someone has to. There is no need to defend Jacob because he did nothing that would need it." Grant's expression tightened, but for once, he didn't have a response. That night, I lay in bed, my wrist throbbing from the tension of the day. I thought about what Jacob had said. A man who loves a woman doesn't forget to pick her up. I would have walked over hot lava. And I realized he hadn't just meant the car. I almost didn't go back to the clinic. It wasn't because I didn't want to. If anything, I thought about the clinic more than I meant to. How calm it felt. How I didn't have to perform for anyone when I was there. There I was, just a woman with a healing wrist and a quiet ache she hadn't named yet. But that was the problem. I didn't want to blur the lines. I didn't want to be the kind of person who mistook kindness for connection, or safety for something deeper. So when I walked into the clinic that day, I had decided. Jacob greeted me with his usual calm. Morning. Wrist still cooperating? Mostly, I said. Could we talk for a moment before we start? He paused, setting the clipboard aside. Of course. I shifted in my chair, heart tapping faster than it should have. I think it would be best if I transferred to another therapist. There was no change in his expression, no flicker of offense or surprise, just a quiet, steady nod. Okay, he said gently. May I ask why? It's nothing you did. Honestly, you've been great. That might be the issue. I swallowed. I think I'm relying on you in ways that have nothing to do with physical therapy. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Thank you for telling me. I glanced up. You're not upset? I'm here to help you heal, he said. If stepping back helps you do that, then that's what we do. He said it like it was the easiest thing in the world. The new therapist was competent, professional, and a woman I might call a friend under other circumstances. She did all the same stretches, measured the same angles, and adjusted my brace in the same careful way. But it wasn't the same. There was no stillness, quiet comfort, no sense of quiet understanding. It felt clinical, like I was a task on a checklist. I left the appointment wondering if I had imagined the difference. 2 weeks passed before I saw Jacob again. I ran into him in the waiting area while scheduling my next session. He had his usual clipboard tucked under his arm and a water bottle in one hand. He offered a polite smile, but didn't linger. Mandy, on the other hand, noticed everything. She was the office receptionist, larger than life, and on that day, she was in full form, wearing a bubblegum pink top, exaggerated lashes, and acrylic nails that tapped against the desk as she smiled a little too widely at him. So, Jacob, she said, practically purring, you still owe me that coffee from like 3 Mondays ago. Jacob chuckled, distracted. That was never a date. Still, she said, tilting her head, the offer is open, unless someone's already claimed your schedule. Jacob didn't respond to the bait, just gave her a pleasant nod and disappeared down the hall. I didn't feel jealousy, just clarity. He wasn't oblivious to Mandy. He just wasn't interested. By the time I walked to my car, I realized something. I didn't miss Jacob because I had feelings for him. I missed feeling seen. I missed the version of myself that felt whole when I was in his presence, the one who didn't have to explain, defend, or diminish her thoughts to keep the peace. That night, I opened the notebook I hadn't touched since college and started writing. Not about Jacob or Grant, just about what it felt like to be in my skin again. It wasn't a declaration, but it was a beginning. I saw the email while I was stirring soup. It popped up on my phone, buried between a coupon for scented candles and a reminder to pay the water bill. The subject line read, Wedding Confirmation, Weston, Moreno. My stomach dropped. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the message. It was from a coordinator I didn't know. Attached was a PDF listing a confirmed venue, new date, and contractual payment plan for an early autumn ceremony, our wedding. A wedding I hadn't agreed to reschedule, one we had put on hold after my accident. Grant had done it. He had booked the whole thing behind my back. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the details until the text blurred. My name was there in black and white, stamped on timelines and table arrangements like I was a prop in someone else's life. I didn't cry. I just turned off the stove and sat down. The next day, we met at my request at a restaurant halfway between our offices. It was neutral territory, again because I insisted. If I'm honest, I don't know what I meant to do that day. I just knew that I wasn't willing to allow someone else to make every choice in my life for me. He arrived 15 minutes late, adjusting the sleeves of his blazer and giving me that easy, public-facing smile. This would be much easier if you moved in with me, Grant said the moment he sat down. Then we could talk at home. I frowned. It was the same complaint he mentioned every time we met. It just makes sense, he'd said. You're practically there all the time. Grant was overstating it, of course. I hadn't been at his place much since my accident, Not that he would notice, other than to complain that I wasn't at his beck and call at all hours of the day and night. I'd always hesitated, giving excuses I barely believed. At that moment, I understood why I hadn't given in. Giving him that kind of control would have erased me entirely. "You look tense," he said, sitting across from me. I didn't answer. I slid my phone across the table, the email glaring up at him. He hardly glanced at it. "Yeah, I figured it was time." "Time for what?" I asked. "To move forward. We've been drifting since the accident. We needed a reset. You told me we'd talk about it when the time was right." He shrugged. "And it is. We've had months for you to recover and put our plans into motion again. The venue was available. I didn't want to lose the deposit." My hands curled into fists on my lap. "You made a major decision about my life without even asking me." "I decided for both of us," he corrected. "That's what partnership is, someone taking the lead when the other person can't." I laughed, short and humorless. "You think I can't make my own decisions? You've been all over the place lately. Therapy, changing appointments, that guy?" My eyes narrowed. "Jacob?" "Yeah, the one who's so eager to help." Grant leaned forward. "Don't think I haven't noticed the way you talk about him. You light up." I stared at him. "You're jealous of my physical therapist?" "I'm protective," he said coldly. "Of what's mine." "You can relax," I snapped. "I haven't even seen Jacob in weeks. I switched to a female therapist. Furthermore, I'm not yours." He scoffed. "Right, like that helps." "Typical." He completely ignored my last comment. "It makes it mine," I said firmly. "It's my choice, Grant, my pace, something I get to decide without having to clear it with you first." His eyes flashed. "So what now? You're calling off the wedding because you didn't get a vote on a venue?" "No," I said, standing slowly. "I'm saying, something's broken, and it's not the date or the chairs or the color of the linens. It's us, and I'm not sure how much longer I can pretend it's not." He stood too, trying to mask the panic behind that businessman's calm. "Lila, don't throw everything away over one decision. You're overwhelmed. You'll come around." I looked him in the eye. "Maybe I will, but not on your schedule." I didn't leave in a storm. I didn't throw my napkin or cause a scene. But as I walked away from that table, I felt something snap free inside me, like a thread that had been stretched too tight for too long, finally giving way. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the PDF still open on my laptop. I stared at my name next to his, wondering how I had gotten so close to marrying someone who saw my silence as consent. It was the assumption that I'd go along with anything he decided, simply because I always had. My phone buzzed. "Erica, are you okay?" Me. "He rescheduled the wedding without asking me." "Erica, do you want me to break his kneecaps?" I smiled for the first time all day. Ending it that night didn't feel right, not because I still harbored doubts, but because I didn't want to rush to a decision like that. But I knew something was ending. I just had to find the courage to say it out loud. The night after the dinner with Grant, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I just kept hearing my own unspoken words echo back at me. "Something's broken." It was like I had said it before I believed it. But now that it was out there, I couldn't unhear it, couldn't unfeel the weight of it. The next morning, I called Erica and asked if she and Jasmine could meet me at our usual spot, an old grimy coffee shop with mismatched mugs and the best almond croissants in town. When I arrived, Erica already had a drink in hand and a look that said she knew I wasn't calling to catch up. I sat down, took a breath, and told them everything. About the wedding email, the fight, the accusations about Jacob, that I'd felt more like a client than a fiancé for the past 6 months. Jasmine winced. "He really rescheduled the whole wedding without telling you?" "Yeah, he did. Venue, florist, timeline, the works. He acted as if he were doing me a favor, as if I were paralyzed with indecision." Erica let out a low whistle. "That's not romantic. That's hostile architecture." I blinked. "What?" "It's like when cities put spikes on benches so no one can sleep there. Looks pretty, but it's functionally cruel." I stared at her, then laughed. A full, startled laugh that made my friends grin. You always said he was intense, I murmured. Why didn't you say more? Erica shrugged. You looked happy at first. Jasmine nodded. We didn't want to push. But yeah, we've seen it. The way he talks over you, how you make yourself smaller around him. The old Lila would never have let him get away with it. I looked down at my cup. I didn't even realize I was doing it. You're not now, Erica said softly. I nodded. No, I'm not. Later that day, I called the clinic and asked if Jacob had any availability. Mandy was the one who answered, and her voice perked up the moment I mentioned his name. Jacob? Yeah, he's got a cancellation tomorrow morning. Do you want me to slide you in? Yes, I said quickly. Please. I almost didn't go. Part of me still felt guilty, but a bigger part of me remembered what it felt like to breathe in that space. When I walked in the next morning, Jacob was wiping down a therapy bench and didn't notice me at once. When he did, he smiled. Not politely, but gently. Hey. Hey. You're back. I am. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just that steady quiet again. He didn't ask questions as we moved through the session, but I could feel his attention. Not intrusive, just present. Near the end, as I sat with an ice pack balanced on my wrist, I said, Things with Grant kind of imploded. Jacob glanced up. Are you all right? Yeah, I said slowly. Sometimes I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I saw the control, the way he takes without asking. Jacob didn't respond, just waited. He rescheduled our wedding without even talking to me. I called him out, told him he couldn't keep deciding like I'm just part of the plan. Jacob nodded. How did he take it? Badly, I said. But I told him things had to change. I told him I needed space, boundaries. Good, he said with a quiet nod and a half smile. That takes more strength than people realize. I looked down. It's not over yet, but I'm not pretending anymore either. Jacob leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed. Sometimes people don't need a rescue. It's more important to just give them room to walk out on their own. I smiled faintly. Thanks for giving me that. Jacob just nodded once, like he already knew. Before I left, Leo appeared with another handmade card, this one featuring a lopsided cat and about 30 smiley face stickers. I made this, he said, proud as a peacock. It's a Get Better Again card. I laughed. It's perfect. Jacob ruffled his son's hair. He makes those for people he likes. Leo beamed. Can I make one for your dog? I don't have a dog. Leo paused, unbothered. Well, get one, okay? I promised I'd consider it. On the way home, I realized something. I wasn't looking for someone to rescue me. I didn't need saving, not in the fairy tale sense. I was just trying to find the version of me that felt like home. And somehow, I was getting closer. I didn't want to go. Every part of me knew how this would end, not because I was being dramatic or impatient or unforgiving. I just knew. And yet, I went, because part of me still believed in doing things the right way. There was something valuable in giving people chances, in not pulling the plug before you'd asked for something better first. Grant had always accused me of being too soft, and maybe he was right. But I didn't think giving someone a final, honest chance was weakness. It was closure. For him, maybe, but mostly for me. We met at his condo. The place was sleek and sterile. Cold finishes, no plants, very little of what I would want to consider a home, and a view that felt like it was designed to impress. Grant was the same as he usually was, though if anything, he was more distant. As I hadn't told him I was coming, I expected at least a hint of surprise, but he greeted me at the door with his usual calm mask in place. I sat on the edge of the couch while he poured a drink at the bar like we were hosting some elegant evening. He didn't ask what I wanted. Maybe he thought I had crawled back to him. Why are you here, Lila? He asked, handing me a glass of water without ice. I thought you needed space. There was something subtle in his question, bitterness that slipped past his careful facade. If I thought his bitterness was instead sorrow at the state of our relationship, I might have acted differently, but I knew he was only bitter that I had ruptured the image of control he had always worn around his shoulders like a robe. I do, I said. But I also believe in second chances. He raised an eyebrow. That's a loaded phrase. It's a clear one. I set the glass down untouched. I need to talk about boundaries, Grant. He leaned back against the counter. Okay, shoot. If we are to salvage this relationship, I need you to stop deciding without me, to listen when I say no, and stop questioning every choice I make that doesn't involve you. Grant chuckled, but there was no amusement in it. So this is about your therapist again. This is about me, I said, voice rising. You rescheduled our wedding, Grant. You didn't ask, you just did it, like I was part of a logistics package. I told you. I know what you told me, I snapped. You told me it was a reset, that I needed leadership. Do you know how humiliating it was when you said that I was all over the place? If I was all over the place, you should have asked why, but it never occurred to you. You never considered my feelings or how I was doing. Did it ever matter what I wanted? You've been impossible to talk to since the accident. No, I said, sharp and clear, not taking his arrogance anymore. I've just stopped letting you talk for me. His jaw tensed. So what, you want me to roll over and let you lead everything now? I want a partner, not a manager, and certainly not a handler. What I don't need is someone who thinks I'm only useful when I'm agreeable. He stood still for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. This is exactly what I meant, Lila. You're emotional and you don't see the big picture. I see it just fine, I said. And I'm not emotional. I'm tired. I'm done shrinking to fit inside this relationship. He stepped forward, arms folding across his chest. So that's it? You're done after everything I've invested? Do you even hear yourself? I demanded. It's all about you, what you've invested, what you want. Have you ever considered what I want? Shaking with anger, I rose and glared at him. People aren't investments, Grant. They are individuals with feelings, hopes, dreams, fears, and everything in between. You either love your partner or you don't. It's that simple. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. It came out like a growl, a feral animal cornered and lashing out. There was no room for compromise, no hesitation or reflection on whether he'd been wrong. In Grant's world, he was always right. My path had never been clearer. No, I said. I almost did. When I said yes to you. Grant followed me to the door. Do you think that guy is going to fix your life? He snapped. Do you think that's real? I turned, hand on the knob. This isn't about Jacob. It never was. But for the record, he never tried to fix me. He just treated me like I didn't need fixing. Grant's face twisted. You'll never be anything without me. You know that, right? I stared at him, calm now. The storm had passed. That's the last lie you get to tell me. And then I walked out. The air outside hit my lungs like a truth I'd been holding back for years. I walked away, like someone who finally remembered what her legs were for. When I got home, I sat in silence for a long time. No music, no television. Just me and my thoughts. And for once, that felt like enough. The next time I walked into the clinic, I wasn't sure how I'd feel walking back in. Relieved, nervous, embarrassed? None of those felt right. When I thought about it walking through those doors, the only thing I felt was ready. I'd called and asked to be rescheduled with Jacob. Mandy had chirped, I knew you'd be back. But I didn't rise to the bait. I wasn't doing this for her or even for Jacob. I was doing it for myself. The waiting room was quiet when I arrived. A soft instrumental playlist drifted from a ceiling speaker, and the faint scent of eucalyptus still lingered in the air. It was strange how comforting that had become. Hey, Jacob said when he saw me. Just that. No surprise, no hesitation. Hey, do you want your usual corner? He asked. I smiled. If it's still available. It always is. The session was steady and familiar. Stretch, brace, test, ice. My wrist was stronger now, but I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the simple act of being treated like someone whose input mattered. We were just finishing when I heard fast footsteps and a tiny voice. Miss Lila! Leo skidded into the room, holding up a new card. This one an explosion of glitter, smiley faces, and what looked like a jellyfish with arms. I made you another Get Better card, he said proudly. This one is just in case you break your other wrist. I laughed. Thanks, Leo. I'll try not to, but this is excellent insurance. He beamed and darted off again. Jacob watched him go, then glanced at me. You're the only patient who gets custom art. I feel honored. We were still smiling when the front door opened, and then Grant's voice cut through the room like a blade. Really? He said. So this is where you've been hiding. Jacob shifted, not aggressive, just aware, protective. Grant stood in the doorway in a tailored suit, his eyes sharp and cold. You were cheating on me the whole time, he said flatly. I knew it. I blinked. What? He gestured to Jacob. Don't bother denying it. This is what you wanted all along. Jacob stood, calm and steady. Sir, I've only seen Lila here at the clinic. Once I drove her home when you didn't come. That's the extent of it. Grant ignored him. You can pretend all you want, but I know what I saw. I exhaled and stood straight. Grant, I can't control what you think, but I know the truth. And you know what? So do you. His mouth tightened. You betrayed me. I tilted my head. You booked a wedding without asking me. You accused me without reason. And let's be clear, you forgot to pick me up when I needed you most. His expression flickered. You're just trying to justify your behavior. You can spin it however you want, I said. But we weren't married. You don't own me. You never did. For a moment, I thought he might keep pushing. But then he saw it, really saw it. I wasn't pleading or unsure. I was just done. Some things can't be fixed, and my relationship with Grant was one of those things. The man I thought I had loved was nothing more than a controlling, manipulative manager who had wanted an accessory he could control rather than a wife. It's over, Grant, I said, holding my head high. You don't want a wife. You want a subject. Find some other woman to dominate. I'm not interested. He scoffed and turned on his heel, storming out with no one at his side, no victory to claim. Silence lingered. Then Mandy, from the front desk, popped her head in. Well, she said, glad that chapter's over. It wasn't funny. I laughed anyway. It broke the tension. Jacob looked at me. Are you all right? I nodded. Yeah, actually. Yeah. We returned to the table, and Jacob adjusted the ice pack on my wrist. After a few quiet moments, he said, almost absently, You know, I've never seen you outside this clinic. I glanced at him. I know. But I'd like to, he added. His voice stumbled just a little, like he wasn't used to saying things like this. When you're ready. I didn't hesitate, and Jacob wasn't unaffected by my brilliant smile. I'd like that too. That afternoon, I tucked Leo's jellyfish card into the side of my mirror at home. It sparkled at odd angles in the light, unbalanced and cheerful. I stood there for a long time, looking at it. Somehow, that messy little card felt like the beginning of everything real. The change was subtle at first. Not that we suddenly started seeing each other outside of therapy. It was that the sessions themselves shifted. What began as clinical gradually became comfortable. Jacob kept things professional, but he smiled more often now. There were moments where he'd pause before touching my wrist, just to make sure I was okay, and sometimes I caught his gaze lingering for half a second longer than it had before. The silences weren't awkward anymore. They were easy, safe. One afternoon, a spring rain caught us as I was leaving the clinic. I hadn't brought an umbrella, assuming the forecast would hold, and Jacob spotted me, hesitating at the door. Without a word, he disappeared into his office and returned with a large black umbrella. Come on, he said. I'll walk you to your car. We moved through the rain, our shoulders brushing beneath the canopy. I could feel the warmth of him beside me, the quiet assurance in his steady stride. At my car, I turned to thank him, but he only offered a small nod, rain beating across his hair. See you Tuesday? He asked. Yes, I said. Looking forward to it. And I meant it. The next time I came in, Leo was in the waiting area with a coloring book and 3 markers that didn't match his mood. I had just the thing. From my purse, I pulled out a sticker book, cartoon animals with silly hats and superhero capes. I had picked it up on a whim, thinking of him. Leo's eyes lit up like it was Christmas. Jacob watched from the front desk, his eyebrows lifting with a mix of surprise and affection. "Looks like you just became his new favorite," he said with a chuckle. I shrugged. I can't compete with a good sticker book. We went to the diner a week later, just the 3 of us. It was planned, casual, and surprisingly easy. Leo started bouncing on the booth seat, and Jacob gave him a look. "Hey, bud, sit down. You're going to launch into the next table." His tone wasn't sharp, just tired in a way any parent would recognize. Then Leo channeled his energy into talking nonstop about a snail he found in the yard that morning. Jacob rolled his eyes and smiled. I listened like it was the most important discovery in the world. After Leo went to the bathroom, Jacob glanced at me across the booth. "You're good with him," he said. "He makes it easy," I replied. We didn't need to say more. As we stepped out into the night air, the warm spring breeze tousling Leo's hair, Jacob and I lingered in the parking lot. Leo was chasing a moth, laughing as it danced through the air. "Are you okay?" Jacob asked, voice low. I looked up at him, really looked. "I think I'm better than okay." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. Later that week, in the therapy room, he adjusted my wrist with the usual care, but his fingers paused just a moment longer. "Pain?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Not that kind." He didn't press. He just nodded, and we moved on. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch outside of therapy, but I felt it. There was something gentle, something sure, something that grew in the quiet space between us, and in that space, I was learning to breathe again. The first time Jacob reached for my hand, it was almost an accident. At the spring fair, the 3 of us stood by the carousel, dusk glowing pink-orange as laughter and music hummed around us. I glanced at Leo as he climbed aboard a painted horse, then felt a warmth slip into mine. Jacob's fingers. I looked down, surprised, but not uncomfortable. He didn't squeeze. He just cradled my hand, like he was asking a question without speaking. I didn't let go. If anything, I tightened my grip. That night, we made dinner at Jacob's house. Leo wanted spaghetti, but we somehow ended up baking homemade pizzas from scratch. Jacob made the dough, I chopped the vegetables, and Leo dumped olives in such chaotic abundance that one slice contained 20. Jacob pulled the pizza from the oven, grimaced. "Okay, maybe a little too crispy on the edges." Leo didn't care, but I smiled. Even perfect people burn dinner sometimes. After dinner, we sat around the kitchen table playing a matching game with worn-out animal cards. Out of nowhere, Leo looked at me and said, "If you marry Daddy, will you be my mommy?" The words stunned me. I froze, unsure what to say. But Jacob stepped in without missing a beat. "I hope so, buddy," he breathed, his eyes meeting mine. Leo grinned and returned to his cards like nothing monumental had just happened. But I sat there, blinking away the sudden ache behind my eyes. The next week brought the town's spring showcase, a quirky little event with music, dancing, and booths manned by volunteers from the community center. Jacob invited me, and I said yes without hesitation. Leo was with his grandparents for the weekend, so it was just the 2 of us. We stood side by side as a local choir sang an off-key rendition of "Lean on Me." Jacob nudged my arm, chuckling under his breath, and I leaned into him, smiling. For once, I wasn't afraid to be seen with someone. As the applause died down and the stage lights dimmed, I turned to thank him for bringing me. But he was already looking at me. Before I could say a word, he leaned in and kissed me. Soft. Sure. No hesitation. I felt my breath catch, not from surprise, but from the way it felt like home. Then I heard the voice. "Well, that didn't take long." I turned, and there was Grant. He looked polished and smug in a designer coat, one hand draped around a glamorous woman whose dress sparkled like it was auditioning for a movie premiere. She had the kind of surgically sculpted perfection that made you question your reflection. Grant smirked. Guess I was right all along. You and your little therapist. Jacob moved in front of me, protective without aggression. You need to walk away. Grant ignored him, looking only at me. You couldn't wait, could you? Must have been seeing him before we even split. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Instead, I folded my arms and looked him square in the eye. You moved on fast. Guess we're even. His mouth tightened. You can think whatever helps you sleep, I said. But I know the truth, and I'm done letting you rewrite it. The woman at his side blinked, catching up to the subtext. Grant's jaw clenched, but he didn't reply. He turned and walked away. For good, I hoped. Jacob was quiet for a moment after they disappeared into the crowd. Then he glanced sideways, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. So, where were we? I laughed, still a little breathless, and kissed him back. This time, it wasn't tentative. It was real. The first to say it was my mother. We were having coffee at my apartment, just the two of us, the sun spilling across the small kitchen table where I'd spent so many lonely breakfasts. She stirred her tea, eyes down. I should have seen it sooner, she murmured. Grant was polished, but not kind. I looked at her, surprised. My mother had always been the you can't expect perfection type, the give it time, men are like that type. I wanted you to have stability, she whispered. But that wasn't stability. That was control. I reached across the table and took her hand. It's okay now, I said, and for the first time I meant it. Erica and Jasmine were less subtle. We were at the bridal shop. Yes, we did that again. And they were picking through swatches while I stood blinking in front of a mirror in a simple ivory dress. Jasmine let out a dramatic sigh. How does someone like Jacob even exist? He's like, emotionally intelligent, hot, and good with kids. Are we sure he's not a mirage? He's real, I said, and smiled. He's just not flashy. That's what makes him easy to miss, but impossible to forget. Erica raised a brow. You're in love with him. I am, I said. But more than that, he makes me feel like I'm myself. Then it's real, she whispered, misty-eyed. This time, it's real. Jacob's sister Carmen drove in from her hometown and stayed for the weekend. The first time she laid eyes on me, she gave me a once-over like a protective older sister, appraising, calculating. Then she saw Jacob look at me from across the room. Carmen smirked. So you're the reason, she said. She didn't need to explain. That night, when we sat on the porch watching Leo chase fireflies in the yard, she leaned over and whispered, He hasn't smiled like that in years. Not since Hannah. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I'm not trying to replace her. You couldn't, she said. That's why he's letting you in, because it's not about replacing. It's about beginning again. Back at Jacob's house, wedding plans were scattered across the dining room table. Lists, brochures, Leo's crayon-drawn schedule that involved cake, dancing, and more cake. Leo was vibrating with excitement. Can I be the ring guy? He asked. Or the speech guy? Or the cake tester? Jacob reached out and tousled his hair. You're the reason we're all here, kiddo. You can be anything you want. Leo beamed and ran off to add ring guy to his list, and I looked at Jacob and laughed. Then I looked down at the ring on my hand. Simple, elegant, not chosen for show, but because I loved it, just like this life. This wedding, it didn't feel like something I was marching toward in a haze of obligation. It didn't feel like performance or pressure. This life felt like home, like waking up to someone who didn't just tolerate me, but saw me and stayed. It felt like I'd finally come back to myself. I hadn't needed a prince. I needed peace. And now I have both.
Original heartwarming fiction every week. Subscribe for your next great story.